what I was saying, we were discussing at an earlier time the colonization of South America and the Caribbean. But the same thing, more or less, is going to be going on in the north. And to understand, there's a lot of different forces acting at this time. But the first theme you'll notice is we have several different news. For instance, we have New France, we have New England, we have New Netherlands. And basically that's telling us is who's settling where. We also have a theme of why people are settling in the first place. Why is it, for instance, that people are coming here in the first place? Why explore into North America to begin with? What are they looking for? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, all those are very good points. They're looking for all these things. Is there, by the way, a lot of gold or silver in North America? Not so much, no. We'll find other ways of exploiting the land, but until that time, there's another thing we're really interested in. Yes? Well, that's true. You're right. The English, especially, you're going to see a lot of those settlers are motivated by religious freedom. And in particular, we have kind of a big political thing going on in England at the same time. Another thing of interest is this idea of the Northwest Passage. What is that? Do you guys know? What does that mean, Northwest Passage? Let me go back to another original question. What did Magellan do? Okay, so how did he do that? He circumnavigated the world by first heading south. Yes? Came this way, down around the Cape, all the way around. Okay? So he has proven that it is possible of going south and west. So that would mean that going north and west is basically the same thing. Only instead, we're going to go this way. Is there a Northwest Passage? Is it possible to sail north and west and go around the world? Not really so much. Technically speaking, you could argue that the Panama Canal allows that. That's not built yet. There's no natural Northwest Passage. But if we look at the French voyageurs, their first explorers were seeking ways to go find the Northwest Passage. Exploring along the St. Lawrence River, they established their colonies all along it in areas that we would consider French Canada. The English are going to do the same thing. The Dutch are going to do the same thing. Even the Americans. You guys have, of course, heard of Lewis and Clark. You know what they were seeking out? A few things, to be sure. But one of them was a Northwest Passage. So this idea is fairly widespread and important in people's minds. So it's going to take some time. Now, as we've established, there's not a whole lot of gold in North America. So what is it that's going to draw people's attention? What economical goods can we sell? Well, there's going to be several. Let's start with the French. What business, what trade were they incredibly interested in? Someone other than Miss Grissom, if I could spread that around. Yes, Miss Sadler. Well, that's really going to be more the English, to be sure. They are going to be very involved in tobacco farming. The French, so the thing is, they're not really settling en masse like the English do. They're not having a lot of folks coming over. The group they have is fairly small. And the reason is the trade that they're doing. It doesn't take that many people. What's the trade they're doing? Look on the whiteboard. Yes. It is fur, absolutely. The fur trade is going to result in a lot of money coming to this area of the world. Fur is one of these luxury goods that people are willing to pay a ton of money for. It's warm, it's soft, it's shiny. It's all these wonderful things. Which, when you think about it, the type of clothes that's really popular nowadays isn't any of those things, is it? Either you're paying a whole bunch of money for a T-shirt with a different brand on it, or you're paying for some other type of cut or design or something like that. Now, that's not to say that fur doesn't still exist and still is a thing that rich people are interested in buying. But suffice it to say, it's not as important as it used to be. But back in these times, this is how you would show off your wealth. You know, the clothing that you wore, which you maybe still do. And fur was the best, and the best fur came from the Americas. Now here's why we don't settle as much as we would say with farming. Who is going to be doing most of the actual trapping? Is it the French? Not so much. Who is it? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Native Americans are going to be doing most of this. And here's the cool thing about this. We are going to trade them goods that like steel, that are manufactured, things that they didn't really have before are going to enrich them too. So for the most factor, this is going to be mutually beneficial. Also, the French tended to start dressing and behaving much like the natives did in terms of the survival gear they would use. For instance, they would start using the Pliny-style canoes and wearing leggings and things like that because it made more sense. That's what people were doing because the climate was kind of inclined for that, you know. It didn't make a lot of sense coming in all the layers of clothing that the Europeans did and almost dying of heat stroke because of the hot summers. So this was just a way that made sense. And they also learned the language. So they tend to have a very good relationship with the Native Americans. Did that mean they didn't fight any wars? Not so much. Man, if you're getting along so well, what could you possibly be fighting? Any ideas? Yes, ma'am. That's a very good guess, and you're going to be right when it comes to the English. The French, though, as we said, aren't settling en masse. So the situation's a little trickier. It has to do with trade rights. Because think of it this way. These tribes are fighting each other. So if I'm trading with this one tribe, that's giving them an advantage over all of their enemies, yes? So they're clearly not going to want that, so they're going to be mad at me, and they might attack me, or say you have to trade with us too, or any number of different political problems. So that's what we're going to be fighting about, but it's going to be fairly few and far between. However, you're absolutely right when it comes to the English. The English are settled en masse, and initially they're looking for this stuff, this gold, but they're not going to find it. Indeed, their colony nearly fails because they're putting so much effort into getting it. So what is the end result? Well, we're going to turn instead to things like cash crops. And what's the one cash crop that did not exist in Europe before was discovered in the Americas? That's going to go absolutely crazy for mayonnaise all across the world. Yes? Sugar? Well, sugarcane actually originates from India. It just happens to grow very, very well here, so I can see why you say that. But there's another cash crop. That would be tobacco. Tobacco spreads en masse throughout the Americas, throughout the world. I'm talking by the 1800s. There is huge, publicly wide addiction to tobacco. Men, women, and children all smoked. Although children more along the age of 8 or 10, rather than say like 3-year-olds. Does anyone know the main method that they would be smoking? Pipes, yes, clay pipes, as well as reed pipes. Other forms of consumption involved, for the lower classes, chewing tobacco. For the rich class, the aristocracy, we have snuff, which is sort of a perfumed powder made of tobacco and chopped really, really fine, and it's inhaled through the nose. And men and ladies of consequence would carry around little boxes that were really nicely decorated with pictures and gems and whatever, you know, and they would keep their stuff in their snuff box. So tobacco is going to be providing a great deal of wealth for the country. In fact, something that's interesting, how does tobacco work? Do you know, like what's the chemical that has a physical reaction? That's the drug aspect of tobacco. Do you guys know? It's nicotine. Nicotine, which by the way is a poison. If you mix it up with water, and you spray it on bugs, it kills them on contact because there's such heavy of a poison. In addition, this tobacco is a depressant, which means basically if you're in a high stress situation, it'll calm you down. This is why, for instance, the military actually included cigarettes in MREs and other rations up until the 1980s. You know, Mr. House, if you ask him, he'll tell you about it. You know, he was in the Army his time. He would get folks giving him, or he would get these cigarettes in his MREs, and that's something he never did. He never smoked. So he would take them and he'd trade them with other people who did smoke, things like candy bars or whatever else he happened to need at the time. It kind of became like a little currency. So this is just something that was used by many different people, and they were heavily addicted to it. It's not quite until later that people start to realize all the medical problems with it, although it was kind of pretty well discovered that it wasn't really good for you. So it's not, it's a little contrary. Some people think it was great, but they did see it was as more harmless than it really is. Now, as we pointed out, what's the similarity between Plymouth and what will eventually become Boston in terms of why the settlers being there? What do Pilgrims and Puritans have in common? They are both what? Yes. Yes, they're both religious groups, absolutely. Do you guys know who the Puritans are, what they believe? Most of you guys are probably familiar with Pilgrims. Puritans believe that pretty much all the stuff that we would consider fun, like dancing and going to plays and things like that, were sins and should not be done. So basically, anything that's fun is bad. Anything that's good is bad. And yeah, it's you know, you might say it's being a little melodramatic. It's totally true. That's kind of what they thought. And this is why, at one point in England, due to problems with the government, the Parliament rebelled against the king and ended up killing him. They put him on trial and killed him and take over the government. And they're basically Puritans. And they end up putting another guy, Oliver Cromwell, as a leader, as kind of the head of state. And when he's head of state, the Puritans have all this stuff where it's just, they get rid of all the playhouses. It's illegal to go see a play. It's illegal to go dancing. It's illegal to drink. It's all these things. And, you know, he said you should focus on piety and hard work. And basically people hated it. They loved Cromwell. They didn't like the puritanical views, though. So once Cromwell dies, there's pretty much a popular revolution against them, and end up establishing a new king who immediately opens up all the taverns and says, yeah, we're going to have a big party. We're going to have all these plays. Everything's going to be fun. It's a great time. So he's immensely popular. And the Puritans are going to be heavily persecuted. So they leave instead to conquer the Americans. So that's sort of that whole story. Anyhow, they end up settling in this area of the world to try to escape religious persecution, and in some cases to convert the Native Americans. So we're going to get to that relationship here in a minute. What about the Dutch? Well, New Netherlands, they're going to settle around the area that's modern-day New York. And that, if you'll notice, what we've talked about so far, splits in half the British territory that we find in what we would consider like more like the very far northern southern states, the kind of middle of the country, and Canada. And so there's going to be a war fought for control of this territory. The British are interested in land. The Dutch are more interested in fur, and they are going to try to get people to settle in this area. They're going to fail. People aren't just not going to want to come here so much at first, so they're going to have to try to open up the colonies, let other people in. So you start to have other folks, like Germans and Swedes, moving into the Americas. So this is why, if you look at the original colonies throughout the North, there's a pretty interesting patchwork of different European peoples in different places. For instance, best German restaurant in North America is in Michigan. Michigan, of all places. Not that I'm hating on Michigan, mind you. It's just, when I think German food, I don't think Michigan. But, you know, well, hey. So, in 1664, England and the Netherlands are going to fight for control of this territory, and ultimately England is going to win. Largely because they have put a lot of money into the Navy. Now think about this for just a second. If you are in Britain, which is an island, which matters more to you, having a strong army or having a strong navy? Navy, it makes sense. If you have a strong navy, you don't need the army, yes? Because if anyone tries to invade, just blow up your ship before they get easy. The other thing that's important is Britain's navy is going to act as a defense for the trade routes that they are using. By the 1700s, Britain's navy is on the rise, and they're going to become the dominant navy in 1807. But nevertheless, this is going to be their means of protecting their colonies. So they're going to be using that to their advantage. Furthermore, they do have a very powerful army as well, and they act together. That's an important thing we have to understand about the various branches of the militaries we're talking about. They all work together. The Navy is what gets the army there in the first place. However, the amount of money that Britain is going to be losing on wars for the next 300, well, not really 300 years, that's a bit extraordinary, more like 100 years, is going to put them hugely in debt. And that's going to have an effect when we get to the American Revolution. Because if you think about it, we really didn't have major deciding victories. I mean, yes, we did have battles that we won, and we ended up winning the war, but it was really fighting a war the British couldn't win to begin with. And that's because they had to pay tons of money and a lot of resources to keep their troops supplied whenever, if you think about it, Britain is many thousands of miles away. Yes, they had Canada, and yes, they had land resources there, but it was fairly limited, not anywhere near the amount of popular support the revolution had. So they basically were fighting an unpopular war. It was costing a lot of money after already spending enough money, so they basically were outmaneuvered. Again, there are multiple ways of winning a war. There's only really one way to lose one. So, this map shows the colonies as we talked about. You notice up here on the St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes, you have this French territory, you have English here and here. Say right here is the Netherlands. And then you have this yellow. Do you guys know who yellow was down here in this area of Florida? Who is that? Think about the language. It helps tremendously. Absolutely, the Spanish. They were fairly content to let all this other nonsense go on because they had already quite a bit of control in the south. However, you'll find they're going to lose some territory later on. Now let's talk Native Americans. The Native Americans are going to have a hard time getting along with the English, and vice versa with the English, because the English were trying to settle and create farms and new colonies and new lands and settle this area, which puts them basically at taking land from the natives. So already we've got a competition there. Secondly, the English and the natives aren't getting along because the English basically have this sort of superiority complex, and basically made a lot of bum deals in terms of treating with the Native Americans. So there's going to be wars fought, and they quickly turn brutal. The reason for that, if we're going to answer, we have to look at the types of war we're talking about. This frontier fighting is going to be very different than fighting in Europe. For instance, let's look at the types of troops we have for each army, and we'll see the differences. First of all, with the British. Over here, you're going to notice the British have a professional army. What does the word professional mean, by the way? You guys know. If I say someone is a professional, what am I saying like that? Yeah? Yeah, they're trained. Which is interesting because professional in and of itself really doesn't mean too terribly much. It's kind of hard, like, what do you mean by that? Generally means that, they're good at something, we're good at what? So if I say that you're a professional student, what does that mean? Well, professional is just a word that means, or is a derivative of the word profession. Profession is another word meaning what? Your profession is your what? It's your job. I'm not saying you're a professional student, I'm saying your job is being a student, which makes sense. That's what you're doing right now, yes? So, if I'm saying you're a professional soldier, your job is to be a soldier, which means that's all you do, which hopefully means you're pretty good at it, yeah? Now, why is this different? A citizen soldier, like we see in the colonies, and even natives, That involves folks who are part-timers. You know, they have a regular job, and then they have soldiering when they have to. In the case of natives, this is kind of rolled into hunters and fighters. This is a man's profession, which is interesting because women's professions tend to be running the household. In some tribes, not all, but some, women had the same say as men. In addition, one thing I think is terribly interesting, in the Blackfoot tribe, there was a concept known as a manly-hearted woman, which basically meant a woman who acted like a guy. She might dress like a guy, or she might, behave in a what we consider masculine way. And basically, this meant that they were fairly industrious. They had opinions. They didn't fear expressing them. They might be quick to anger, things like that. And this was actually seen as a good thing, which is interesting because if you think about our society, if a woman acts overly masculine or if a guy acts overly feminine, we tend to deride them and make fun of them. Yeah, their society saw it as a good thing. So, it's kind of an interesting similarity. But what this means in terms of what are better fighters? Well, if we look at casualties, what percentage of an army would have to die, be taken out of combat, before they run away, before they lose all control and just run away? Well, a professional army at the time, you could expect them to take 15% casualties. After that, they'd run away. The natives were around 5%. Why so much fewer? Was that because the natives were cowardly? Not really, no. See, if we look at who these soldiers are, it starts to make sense. As I said, these are professional soldiers. They're still a job. Frequently, these soldiers are recruited from criminals in the poor. Folks who are joining these armies are the ones who are often given the choice of go to prison or you join the army. They tend to be folks from other countries like Ireland and Scotland. They tend to be the poorest individuals in society, so they're basically seen as expendable. They die and who cares? We'll just get going. The other thing is they're trained in different style of combat. In Europe, they tend to fight skirmish fights. Basically, you have a big line of guys, you load up your weapons, and you fire at another line of guys, and they would fire at you, which seems probably pretty stupid. For instance, I don't know if you guys have ever heard this, but you've heard that the Americans won the War of Revolution because they didn't do that. They would hide behind trees and get cover. It's absolutely not true. Some Americans did that, and some British did that also. This type of fighting is actually really effective because of the weapons you're using. Think of it this way. They are using muskets, yes? What are the two principal flaws of muskets? They take a long time to reload, and they're not so accurate. So what does firing a line do for us? We're all going to fire at the same time. So that means that while I might not necessarily aim at something and hit it, if I fire in the generalist directions of some bad dudes and everyone else in the line is doing that, we're going to hit somebody. Yes? So it's maximizing our weakness. The other thing is we would be in multiple ranks, usually about 3 or 4. Now what's going to happen is the first rank fires, they start reloading, and once they're kind of getting close-ish, about a third of the way done, the next line fires, they start reloading, and then once they're about a third of the way, the next line reloads, and by the time you get to that, the first is ready again. So you can kind of boom, 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 continuous fire. Yes? So that makes sense. It's taking the two weaknesses and applying them to mass application, and it became a movement of maneuvers, because if we can attack them from the sides, position them poorly, we can win the war. Our objective in any battle is to drive the enemy army off the field and hold that position against them. So that's the military mindset of them. The natives, on the other hand, their soldiers are just family members. You're going to war with your brothers and your cousins and your friends, so you don't want to see them die. And if you take too many casualties, that means there's not enough hunters to get enough food to make the family survive. So you are less going to engage in a fight where we're going to hammer at each other over and over and over again like the Europeans will. So what they're going to do is instead rush in, hit them hard, and then run away. It's kind of more of this raiding style. We're going to hit and run tactics. We're going to steal their supplies and run off. We're going to steal horses, weaken their way of fighting that way, and that's how we're going to fight wars. Now, why this is kind of interesting. Think about it. Can both sides win an engagement with this mindset? Yes, they can. Because keep in mind, the British are interested in driving the enemy force off, which is fine with the natives. They just want to run, hit, and run. So, like you'll have in the history books, folks like, both sides won the war. Well, how does that possible? Because they had different objectives. It isn't working out. But this is the type of war that's going to happen. Now, think about this. If you have a really bad battle, where they end up taking an area, and that's your village, not only are our soldiers going to have to throw women and children, yes? They're indistinguishable from the soldiers. So they're going to retaliate by attacking the families of the soldiers and killing their wives and children and the soldiers and all this and stuff. So the fight intensely turns to basically mass slaughters. Each side is committing war crimes and atrocities. And it's really a sad thing. Take Provincetown. It's burned to the ground. Most of the people escape, but still those who do not are flat out killed. And so this creates this really bad blood. We see a lot of racism on both sides against the other because of these terrible things that are going on. And, you know, this is the way the war was fought. Like, in frontier fighting was incredibly dangerous. You can understand that while when someone's like, you know, I'm going to move to a new world and take my family, they're putting them in grave danger, a possibility of grave danger. And some of these guys, you got to like, man, they're either crazy or incredibly brave or something, because the potential profit of the rewards of getting your own land, you couldn't afford it. Normally it's astronomical and you can't turn that down. But on the other hand, you've got this huge risk at the same time. So it's just kind of, you know, it's these different things, you know. But I digress. Any questions? That's pretty much it for today, then. Make certain you read. Tonight you have Chapter 4, Sections 3 and 4. Again, like I said, the first Chapter 4, Section 3 is kind of small. It's only 4 terms. So it's kind of added together. I think it's total like 7 or 8. So it's not too much. But anyways, have a look at that, and we will talk more tomorrow.